Do you want me to put this, guys? Yeah, leave them in and up, bro. Not too far away. Yeah, about there. About there? Yeah. About there? Take a little bit. Happy? Hang on, I'm getting like several instructions here. This way. She's here and there. They want to stay and look back at shot. They're going to be good? Yeah, that'll be good. So we'll get some right? Can we do a quick level check? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, that's where it is. Yeah. It's not moving.
Okay, background shot good? Good there? That way?
We just have to roll it.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, thank you everyone for joining us here this afternoon, and this is a chance for us to introduce the members of the new Labour caucus. You'll see behind me we have 13 additional MPs joining us here in Parliament. In total, 17 new MPs really will be refreshing our caucus after this election. No one has expanded quite like Labour has, and that's something that we feel really proud of at the conclusion of this campaign, and we have a wonderful team with brilliant talent. So, introducing them all to you today. You'll get to know them over time, but now ready for any questions.
Just in terms of Winston Peters, number of bottom lines he's laid on the table, I just want to run through them with you. Water tax, where do you stand on that?
I'm not going to be answering any specific questions around individual items that may be part of negotiations between the parties that are potentially in a position to form a government.
Okay, but you do have some common ground.
We
so,
do.
For instance, Pipe River re-entry, happy with that one?
Yeah, we certainly have common ground, and we certainly have areas where there would be useful discussions, but I'm not going to carry out a negotiation here before we've had a chance to speak individually with party leadership and their teams. You know, my view is that currently it's clear that the leaders of the different parties do want to take a bit of time. I respect that. I also respect the time they want to take to talk to their colleagues. My expectation, my plan is to make some calls later in the week over the next few days, but for now I'm giving that space for a little bit of consideration and reflection. I have spoken to James. We had a conversation yesterday afternoon.
Have you had a meeting?
We haven't had a chance to face-to-face. I expect that we'll do that over the next couple of days.
What did you talk about? What did you and James talk about?
No. I made a decision that at this point it was clear to me that Mr. Peters wanted to take a little bit of time out in Whirinaki, and also time perhaps to talk to colleagues. I'll be doing the same. My expectation is over the next couple of days to reach out, but I haven't done so yet.
Would it be the blind negotiation situation? The blind negotiation situation where you're not in a bidding war? Is that how you want to conduct the negotiations?
Oh, look, we'll be reflecting on the way negotiations have successfully been conducted in the past, but my expectation is that we'll have a team that will speak one-on-one as a team to team, and that's how things have been conducted in the past.
You guys haven't agreed any ground rules or
No.
anything? You're not there then?
No. My plan is to make sure our team is ready, formulating our senior negotiating team and also a reference group. I'll be bringing together our front bench and, of course, having a caucus discussion tomorrow, and then we'll go from there.
Where will David Parker fit into those negotiations?
I'll be meeting with my front bench tomorrow to put together our negotiating team and also the wider group that we'll be working to. Usually the expectation is your negotiating team's a bit smaller, but the wider group that you work with is a bit larger.
When would you expect to have a face-to-face with Winston Peters over this?
I haven't set any expectation over that yet.
How big do you think you're negotiating?
I'd like to keep it relatively tight.
You've got your MPs and
Yes, we'll have a front bench tomorrow afternoon.
you've got your new MPs behind you. You're actually going to ask them to bring in more MPs this time than last time around. Do you think that gives you the momentum and perhaps helps you in terms of attracting Winston Peters?
Oh, look, it definitely demonstrates where the mood fell on election night, and that was to vote against the status quo. I'm really proud that as a result of that campaign, we have brought in so many excellent new MPs, and each and every one of them will make a huge contribution to our caucus.
So do you think the momentum argument might trump the biggest party argument?
Oh, look, only time will tell. Certainly, though, the majority of New Zealanders voted against the status quo, and you can see that reflected behind me in the new MPs that we're bringing into Parliament.
Policy-wise, where do you think?
Yeah, we haven't quite reached our target yet, but I won't be making a final call on how well we've done or not until we have the specials counted. At the moment, from my last count, I think we have 19 from my last count, but I'll be waiting until we've got the specials because our next on the list are 2 women.
There are more new women every, there are more women, aren't there?
Yes, but overall, of course, we were taking an overall count on what our total caucus looked like, and we haven't quite reached our target, but that's without the specials having come in. So I'll do a bit of reflection on that once we have our final caucus.
And your front bench, how will that shape up gender-wise?
At the moment, I'm not in a position to talk about where our final senior team will look like. At the moment, I'm maintaining the same front bench we had in the last caucus to keep that stability while we go through this process, through this stage of negotiation.
What do you think the chances are?
Oh, not immediately. For now, I'm maintaining the status quo while we work through this period of change.
What are the chances that you're going to become Prime Minister?
Oh, look as good as they were on election night.
Well, on election night, it sounded like you were giving a concession speech in that call to English. I mean, did you set the wrong tone?
No, look, my call to Bill English was as much about the way that I do politics. I had to acknowledge that he had taken a greater portion of the vote than I had, and as 2 individuals who were up against each other during the campaign, I thought it was only fair and sporting to acknowledge that. But this is MMP. What was generated on election night was not a confirmation of what the government would look like. Our job now is to work what voters delivered us, which was an expectation that as a party that took votes and as a bloc that voted against the status quo, to see if we can form a stable coalition government.
Do you think that New Zealand First's policies align more with yourself or national?
Oh, look, I certainly see shared values there, and certainly I saw New Zealand First campaigning hard for change. Now it's up to us to see if we're able to form a stable coalition government.
Yeah, but change or not, the policies in particular, where do you line up?
Oh, I see a lot of alignment. I do. In the short lists that have been prepared by some of the media, there is a lot of alignment between New Zealand First and Labour. But I'm not going to set here expectations when actually these negotiations need to be had between party leaders. And I want to give the space that the other party leaders would like to work through with their team what their expectations are.
So, Dan, something like the Water Act, Winston Peters has indicated that that's something that he doesn't want to see happen. How willing is Labour generally to pull back on some of those controversial policies?
Look, I know that both parties share a desire to see our waterways cleaned up. I'm not going to carry out negotiations here, but again, I think that there is a shared ambition and goal, but it's up to now individual parties to see if we can make that work and form a stable government.
So you're standing for
Change your policies that you took the election.
When voters deliver us an outcome, it's up to us to see if we can then turn that around into a stable government, keeping in mind the things that we campaigned hard on. But it's now up to us to form that stable government.
Will you rule out a referendum on the Māori seat?
Oh, that is one that very early on we said was not part of our party policy. Our strong view was that it was always going to be up to Māori to decide what happened to the future of the Māori seats rather than a binding referendum. So look, of course, we have just taken all of the Māori seats through hard work and campaigning, and our policy on that has not changed and will not change.
So you're not willing to flex?
That one I was very clear on. That one we've taken a firm view on, absolutely.
So part of your...
Well, we've right from the beginning took a very firm view on that, and it would be completely contradictory for us to work so hard in those Māori seats to earn the respect of those voters, to then work across them, to then undermine that. So that's why we were clear on that from the very outset.
So we can call that a non-negotiable?
That one's a non-negotiable.
Could be a Māori.
Oh, look, for me, it's about making sure that people are very, very clear that it was Māori only for the future of those seats. But keeping in mind, of course, we've just taken all of those seats. We need to respect the decision that voters made to call us to be their representatives.
Could be a referendum.
No, it's not something that I expect to be high on our agenda. Certainly, we've ruled it out. We've ruled it out.
For
Can
New
you
Zealanders,
describe your approach to negotiations? I mean, is it, everything on the table at all costs, or?
Oh, no, you will see from the address I gave on election night that there are certain things that we're in politics to try and achieve, and that unless you're in the position to achieve them, then there's no point governing if you can't deliver for the people that you're there to represent. So certainly there are some real priorities for us, particularly across housing, across health, and across repairing our environment. We'll be sticking to those.
What about tertiary education?
What happens behind closed doors is for them. I can only dictate the way that our negotiations will be undertaken. I'll undertake them in the same way I did a campaign. Respectful, making sure that we put our case forward for change, because that's what New Zealanders did.
What about work for you when National went low?
Oh, look, just because National went low in the campaign does not mean that that is where we'll go either in our future campaigns or in negotiations. It's just not our style.
Just tertiary education, both yourselves and New Zealand First obviously have the value of free tertiary education, but very different policies implementing them. Would you look at their policy?
Oh, look, it does speak to the fact that we do have some shared values around making tertiary education more accessible. But again, as I said, apart from setting out our expectations early on about one particular point of policy, I'm not going to carry out negotiations here.
Where do you sit on relocating Auckland's port to Northland?
I'm on record on that already, so that is one I'm happy to again just state what I've stated before, which is that we take a view that we do have to make sure the future of the port for Auckland is sustainable. We don't see expansion at its existing site as being sustainable. That does mean we need to look at new locations. We've always said we'll do that with a view to making sure we do what's best for the rest of New Zealand.
So you're quite happy to move the port?
Well, yes, we've always been happy to move the port. That predates any floating of that suggestion.
Do you think there's more policy overlap between Labour and New Zealand First and New Zealand First?
Oh, of course, that's a subjective view. From where I'm sitting, yeah, I would take that view. But again, that's my own view. It'll be up to the team from New Zealand First to determine if they hold that view too. And I'm not going to stand here and predetermine that for them. This all needs to happen within our negotiations.
What's a reasonable period that New Zealanders should wait to find out when the next government?
I expect that all of us are going to be trying to move as quickly as we can. But at the same time, I think New Zealanders would probably expect that we wait for all the votes to come in too. My intention is to try and make sure that we are absolutely prepared. So we'll be using the next 2 days in particular to set the groundwork for our negotiating teams, set the groundwork around policy, and from there be ready for talks to take place. But I would expect, of course, we need to know the lay of the land after those final special votes are counted.
James Shaw this morning said that he expected... James Shaw this morning said that he expected one-on-one talks to initially start, but eventually for all three parties to talk together. Is that your understanding?
Oh, I haven't set down a firm expectation around that. My early expectation would that they would be primarily one-on-one in those early stages.
Just on the port, what's wrong with expanding it where it is right now?
Oh, I've always opposed that. I don't think there is an argument from an economic and environmental perspective to continue to do that. You'll recall, if you look back on some of the protests around the port expansion, I was not alone in that. There were certainly others that held that view, but that's been a long-held view for me that I've taken for some time.
What are some of the economic reasons?
Oh, if you look at the value of the land that the port sits on, for instance, and the expansion, the cost of that expansion, if that's not a viable position for them in the long term, why would we invest in that way for them to remain there? But again, this is well canvassed. You can reflect back on probably well over a year ago, I joined protest around the port expansion because I just did not think the argument had been made. And I think even potentially you'll find that the Mayor has come to that view as well.
How much wriggle room do you have in your budget to accommodate New Zealand First and their policy?
Again, we're not going to undertake negotiations here.
You put your budget out there. How much wriggle room is there?
we're not going to undertake negotiations here. What we'll make sure is that whatever we do, we'll stick to our budget responsibility
so
rules.
some of that unallocated, so you could extend the unallocated. You could
We
cut
will
back on
we will
policy?
stick to our budget responsibility rules, which means that we will put constraints around ourselves to make sure that whatever happens in those negotiations to form a stable government, we will have a stable economic basis for them as well.
So some of, say, for instance, health spending, could you cut into that to accommodate?
What I'm saying is that we will make sure we stick to our own budget responsibility rules. And again, health is one of the areas where we highlighted a belief that there was a need for reinvestment. I think that'll be a view shared by a number of parties. The other parties were involved in negotiations.
So you could not deliver some of your promises to New Zealand?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I'm not conducting a negotiation here in a media pack today. Conversations need to be had between those party leaders. We've set out clearly our expectation and the need for investment in things like health, housing and education. We'll be continuing with that line of argument in any talks we have.
Because Winston Peters, some of his bottom lines have huge price tags on them.
Yeah.
How are you going to accommodate that?
And that'll be a conversation that both parties will be having, because of course when you look at the operating allowance for National, theirs was very similar to ours, so both parties are in that position if you factor in the costs they need to account for health in particular.
Just on the timing, I understand you obviously want to wait for the special votes to come back, but would you be keen to start negotiations?
Oh, look, the specials coming back doesn't preclude us from preparing for those talks, for making sure that we've got our teams ready, that we've got a policy agenda to start a conversation with, and certainly I think it's key that we do that preparatory work. I think all of us want to make sure we keep faith in MMP, and that means making sure we move as quickly and as responsibly as we can, but at the same time recognising we do need to have all the votes in.
So is it your understanding that Peters wants to wait until the special come in to start?
Oh, that's not necessarily my understanding, but we'll prepare. But I also understand if there will be an expectation that we see what the final makeup of Parliament
But
is.
you could start before this. You could start negotiations.
I think you could, but I don't expect you'd see any firm conclusion until we know the final makeup of Parliament.
Is there any risk at all that New Zealand will end up going back to the polls if the deadlines aren't met?
I don't think anyone wants to see that outcome.
It's into the largest Māori caucus ever.
Yeah.
How's the Māori electorate going to be rewarded?
Yeah, and I think that's something that Labour feels both enormous pride but also responsibility over. It's now incumbent on us to make sure that we are doing everything we can to deliver for Māori. Of course, that stands for the coalitions we're about to undertake, but regardless of what position we are in, we will be advocates to lift Māori home ownership, lift outcomes for Māori health, and lift job opportunities and hope for our rangatahi.
Labour conversation with Bill Short, didn't you?
Oh, yes, he gave me a call last night. It was great to catch up.
What did you talk about?
The election, as you imagine that two leaders would. Of course, we take a great interest in politics on both sides of the ditch, so we just had a bit of a conversation around what's happened and where to from here.
Did you get any other calls from all the leaders?
No.
Labour
They probably don't know what to say to us just yet.
Labour increased its vote in almost everywhere that's not Auckland. Despite you being from there and several issues, you campaigned very strongly on health and housing.
You're excluding Mount Albert
The crux.
and Auckland Central.
Yeah. Auckland widely.
Yeah.
Labour did not do as well as it would hope.
Oh, look,
what do you think the problem is?
we'll take time to reflect over that decision, over those outcomes. Of course, we haven't quite had the time available yet, given it's just Monday, to look over where we strengthened our position, which was in a lot of areas, and where we could have done better. I expect that we will do that because, of course, we want to make sure that we continue to present a vision that demonstrates, particularly to Aucklanders, how we can resolve some of their two biggest issues, which was housing and transport.
Still just on the timing of it.
Yeah. An incredibly diverse range of MPs coming from urban and rural areas. To cover off all of their skill sets in one go would be a long conversation, but I think we're filling some areas where we'd like to have boosted our skill set, and I'd love for each of you to have a chance to talk to some of our new MPs in particular to see just the diversity of who I have standing behind me. I'm not going to pick out individuals. I'm proud of every single one of them, and I had a chance to see a number of their campaigns during the election, and all of them were fantastic, and each and every single one of them deserved to be here in Parliament.
And you've got 17 MPs, but also a baby.
Yes, that's right. Well, actually, a couple.
Oh, a couple.
Yeah. We've got two new babies that sit within this caucus. Yeah.
So Willow Jean's
and Kitty. Kitty's got a new baby as well. Sorry, just to tell everyone's family story. Yeah. So I think again that speaks to the fact that we're reflecting. Our caucus reflects everyone at different stages of life, and I think that's fantastic, and as it should be.
When you spoke to James Shaw, did he raise the possibility of a Green national government?
Oh, look, the conversations that I have with the different leaders, it would be a disservice to them to disclose the nature of those conversations. So I'm happy to make sure that people know when we're having conversations, but the nature of them, certainly I'll be keeping to myself and to our team.
So yes, you did?
I'm keeping the nature of all the conversations to ourselves and to my team.
Still just on the timing. October 7th is when we find out the special votes, but is it going to be that day, or is it going to be a week or 2 weeks after that, or when are people going to find out who's going to be the next government?
Look, we certainly will be moving as quickly as we can, but like I say, I don't think anyone would expect necessarily for there to be a declaration of a new government before 15% of votes had been counted.
All right, everyone. Angela Merkel's forming a coalition of 36%. Does that give you
I think every single situation is different. Certainly in New Zealand, I think that there's been an expectation now that you work with what the majority of New Zealanders deliver to you to try and establish a stable, strong coalition government, and that's what we're all undertaking now.
Are you worried that James Shaw could ditch you for National?
No, that's of course a decision for the Greens as their own independent party, but no, nothing I've seen suggests that to me. Great. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Does anyone want to check quickly, because we've got about 10 minutes?
It's just north of Auckland there. It's been in the